The 30th of January, 1933, Germany. Adolf Hitler is appointed Chancellor of Germany, and the Nazi regime quickly begins to restrict the civil and human rights of the Jews and other individuals deemed to be enemies of the state, and opens the first concentration camp, Dachau, situated near Munich. The regime targets not only Jews and political prisoners, but also Afro-Germans, who are discriminated against and persecuted despite their relatively small presence in Germany. Even though the Nazis do not have an organized program to eliminate them, an unknown number of black people in Germany and German-occupied territories will be sterilized, incarcerated, or murdered. One such man is Gert Schramm. Gert Schramm was born on the 28th of November, 1928, in Erfurt, the capital and the largest city of Thuringia, then part of the Weimar Republic, which was the government of Germany from 1918 to 1933. His parents were Marianne Schramm, a white German woman, and Jack Branson, a black American engineer, with a steel company from San Francisco who arrived in Thuringia on a contract in order to build a bridge. The two met in the shop of gentleman's tailor Gert Schramm, who was Marianne's father. Racism was a part of black people's everyday lives in Weimar Germany, and this made it difficult for them to find employment, a situation exacerbated by the Great Depression, which started in 1929, 1 year after Gert Schramm was born. Jack Branson, after the termination of his contract, left Germany but kept coming back to Thuringia, where his son Gert was growing up. When Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came into power in Germany in 1933, they began to put their discriminatory and false ideas about race into law and practice. The Nazis wanted to create a racially pure Germany, and they considered Germans to be members of the supposedly superior Aryan race. They targeted Jews, Roma and black people, including Gert Schramm, as non-Aryans, and as members of the supposedly inferior races. The Nazis passed laws that limited the rights of non-Aryan Germans. These laws were primarily intended to exclude Jews, but they also applied to black and Romani peoples. For black Germans, the Nazi era was a time of escalating persecution, marginalization, and isolation. Though they had faced racism during the Weimar era, the institutionalized racism of the Nazi regime made life for them and their families even more difficult and precarious. As a result, black people in Germany saw the Nazi rise to power as a turning point in their lives. Nazi racist ideology permeated all aspects of life in Germany. Many Germans embraced this ideology and openly discriminated against black people on their own initiative. As a result, for several thousand black people then living in Germany, it became increasingly difficult to find and keep work. Colleagues and bosses were reluctant to work with people whose skin color marked them as outsiders in the Nazi racial community. Firings, evictions, and poverty were common. Some black people remember life in Nazi Germany as a time in which strangers spat on them and called them racial slurs with impunity. In April 1933, the law for the restoration of the professional civil service removed people of non-Aryan descent from the German civil service. The decree was vague as to how exactly to define non-Aryan descent. The intention to exclude Jews was obvious, but subsequent decrees clarified that this also applied to black and Romani people. In practice, relatively few black people were directly affected by this law because only citizens could be civil servants. And most of those black people who were German citizens were still too young to be employed in the civil service. These citizens were multiracial children born in the Rhineland, a region in western Germany. Their mothers were white German women, and their fathers were mostly French colonial soldiers, who had been part of the large Allied military occupation of the Rhineland between 1918 and 1930. During the Weimar era, there were between 600 and 800 multiracial children born in the Rhineland, and the German press referred to them using the derogatory label, Rhineland bastards. These children were often discriminated against because of their fathers and their physical appearance. They experienced racism from their neighbors, classmates, and even in their own families. While some remained with their birth mothers or their families, others were placed into children's homes or adopted. The previously mentioned decree and subsequent race-based restrictions severely limited future job opportunities and career paths for these children. It also made clear that the Nazis did not consider black people part of the German national community, and intended to formally exclude them from German society. In September 1935, the Nazi regime announced the Nuremberg race laws, which put Nazi ideas about race into law. Those laws primarily targeted Jews, but beginning in November 1935, the Nuremberg laws also applied to Romani and black people, whom the regime referred to derogatorily as gypsies and Negroes and their bastards. There were two Nuremberg race laws. The first, the Reich Citizenship Law, defined a German citizen as a person who is of German or related blood. The point was to exclude people whom the regime saw as racially inferior, namely Jews, Roma, and black people, from having political rights in Germany. The second was the law for the protection of German blood and German honor. This law banned race mixing, or what was called race defilement. It forbade future intermarriages and sexual relations between Jews and people of German or related blood. A subsequent supplement to the law forbade black people in Germany to marry people of German or related blood. The goal was to prevent black people from marrying and having children with Germans. The Nuremberg race laws made it very difficult for black people in Germany to marry, start families, or build a future. They particularly affected those of reproductive and marrying age. While it was legal for black people to marry each other, those couples were rare because of the small size of the black community. Despite the Nuremberg laws, some black people and so-called German Aryans still became romantically involved with one another. These relationships were dangerous for both partners, especially if they chose to try to legally marry. In Nazi Germany, everyone was required to apply for permission to marry. When interracial couples applied, their applications were consistently denied for racial reasons. These applications brought their interracial relationships to the attention of the government authorities. This often had dire consequences for the couple. In multiple cases, marriage applications resulted in harassment, sterilization, and the breaking up of partnerships. Legal couples whose marriages predated the Nuremberg laws were harassed by the Nazi regime. The regime pressured white German women to divorce their black husbands. Interracial couples and their children were often humiliated and even assaulted when they appeared together in public. Like their parents, many black children in Germany experienced the Nazi era as a time of increased loneliness, isolation, and exclusion. Some black children felt German and wanted to be part of the excitement, but Nazi racial ideology had no place for black German children. For black children in Nazi Germany, schools became sites of humiliation. Black children were often degraded in racial science classes and ridiculed by teachers who supported the Nazis. Just as the Nazification of the education system greatly restricted the rights of Jewish children to attend public schools, it also impacted black children over the course of the 1930s. Some black students were expelled and unable to complete their education. Few private schools would accept black students, and finding apprenticeships, which in Germany was crucial to find employment, became increasingly difficult. Such was the case of Gert Schramm. After completing elementary school, he worked as a helper in a car repair shop. According to the Nuremberg laws, he was denied the right to any apprenticeship as a Mischling of the first grade. Mischling was a pejorative legal term used in Nazi Germany to denote persons of mixed Aryan and non-Aryan ancestry as codified in the Nuremberg racial laws of 1935. Most of the black people living under the Nazi regime were effectively trapped there. While some tried to leave, for the vast majority this was not possible, as they could not receive visas to other countries or legally immigrate elsewhere because of citizenship issues. Eventually, black people in Germany had little choice but to adapt to life under the Nazis. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939 with the invasion of Poland. During World War II, Nazi policies against black people became more extreme. This occurred in the context of the broader radicalization of Nazi policies against supposed racial and political enemies. Because of laws and policies that sharpened discrimination and racism in Germany, many